lunch for you to help you get settled in on your first night.
Is it just me, or are some of the easiest questions of FNAF the hardest to answer? I mean, my gosh, it's been 11 years and we still don't know the year of the gameplay of FNAF 1. Many of you watching this video at the moment probably have a date in your mind. Oh, it's 93, 98, or 94, so forth and so on, but none of these quite fit. There's always something that just doesn't quite work. But I think I've found something that makes it all make sense. I want you to set aside your biased opinions. Forget about the logic of other theories for a moment, and just take a look with me, with fresh eyes. We need to focus on just the cold, hard facts. And the first thing we need to start with is, MatPat's very first video on the FNAF franchise gave us one of the most popular years that we often hear, 1993. It's a bit of a random year, to be honest, but how did MatPat come to this conclusion? And the way that he came to this conclusion was by taking the amount of money that we are paid at the end of the week of working at Freddy's. The total amount comes to $120, and he found by comparing it to minimum wage that this would land us somewhere in the early 90s. And if we use the conventional idea of being paid on a Friday, the only time when November 12th, which is the date that is located on the FNAF 1 check, the only time that this was a Friday was 1993. Boom, solved. Well, not quite. Because as time has gone on, this has gotten way more fishy and murky. And to be completely honest, even though we've used this date as kind of the standard, there has been a couple others thrown around in theorizing, but unfortunately, from Scott, we've never gotten a 100% confirmed answer until about 1 year ago. Scott Cawthon decided to release a book series called the Interactive Novels, which we all know and love by this point. One of which being The Week Before. Sounds dramatic, right? Well, it very well should be. This book is supposed to take place, you guessed it, the week before FNAF 1's gameplay. Logic says that if Scott hid us a clue within this book to tell us when the game took place, it would be right here. And it was starting to look like this was the case. However, just like in Scott-like fashion, he didn't give us just one definitive year possibility within this book, he gave us at least 3. You gotta love Scott. This book gives us so many important references. We play as a man named Ralph, who is actually a phone guy, so hey, it was nice to get an answer to that question. And we also find out that he was the one who recorded the FNAF 2 phone calls in a very interesting quote as he listens to himself. Quote, "It's strange to listen to a recording of yourself, especially one from so long ago. If you remember correctly, your daughter had just been born." Right there is our first little piece of evidence. If we can just figure out closely to how old the daughter is, we could get even closer to figuring out when FNAF 1 took place. Well, according to the book, Ralph's daughter, whose name is Capella, is 11 years old, and so technically, that would make the 1993 year work. Hooray, it's solved! Unweathered Truth, what are you doing here? Did you find out that it actually doesn't work, and that you actually have to break the book in order to get her age? Scott, did you proofread this book? Please tell me you did. That's right. In order to get Capella's age of 11, which could confirm that 1993 is the date, it doesn't work. You have to basically break the story of the book in order to get it. Also on the same page where we get Capella's age of being 11, it claims that we've never brought her to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza where we work. However, in another place in the book, it says that she's never gotten over the time when you brought her to Freddy's. So, what? It's clear to see why we get so frustrated with this franchise. I mean, my gosh. So that's when we started turning our eyes to new possibilities of when this game takes place. He references a quote from The Goonies, which was a movie from 1985. He references The Lost Boys from 1987, and Lethal Weapon movies, which the second one was released in 1989. He also mentions that his daughter enjoys playing the Sega Genesis, which is a classic console and was released in, you guessed it, 1989. And so it's not far out of the box to speculate that because they don't go any further than 1989, that it must be happening in that specific year. But there are two important key things that go against this idea. And I think it's big enough to say that this is the wrong year. Tom from Game Theory pointed out that there's a section in the book where Ralph is referring to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza as, quote, the happiest place on earth. But as we all know, that's the slogan from Disney. And Ralph was saying that he was worried about infringing upon their trademark. And this quote from Disney was trademarked on the year of 1998. So why would Ralph be worried about this if it hadn't even been trademarked yet? And that is where we get the next year. Also, the next thing that would go against this is in FNAF 1, there is this quote from Ralph.
If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
For 20 years. Now, if we're saying that 1989 is the correct year, that would mean these characters would have had to have existed 20 years prior, and this date just doesn't fit. But let's look at the next candidate, the one that I'm the most excited to talk about, 1998. As we just confirmed, it was the year that Disney trademarked the term, the happiest place on earth. And so that lines up. The next thing that also lines up is the date that we see on the check, which is November 12th. Because if we remember in FNAF 2, we were also paid on November 12th. But this time, we know the actual year. Oh, thank you, Scott. It was 1987. And by taking a look at a calendar, strangely enough, this is not a Friday. This is a Thursday. So we can only assume that Fazbear Entertainment would keep up this strange way of paying and did the same thing on FNAF 1. And one of the years that fits this mold of November 12th being a Thursday is none other than 1998. And it also fits with this one specific clue from Ralph that he says on night 1.
If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
20 years. That's right. And do you know what 20 years prior is from 1998? That's right, 1978. And what if we were to say that Ralph merely just rounded up? Because it might be weird to say, singing those same songs for 19 years. Bro, just round up. It sounds way more satisfying. And so he does. That could mean he was referring to 1979, which, as you all know, we have an entire game for the year of 1979, Secret of the Mimic. And it is within this game that I believe we see something interesting. You see, even though this date, 1998, lined up with so many important things, there was still one gripe that Tom with Game Theory had with it and multiple other people had with it. How is it possible that Freddy Fazbear, this animatronic, not the character, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, existed this far back, and therefore could account for him saying they have not been washed? Well, here's a news flash. In Secret of the Mimic in 1979, in the basement of MCM, in the research and development area, we find that Edwin Murray is hard at work on the Fazbear Project, a mysterious project that is revealed to be the very first opening of the first original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. And according to the game tokens that we've seen multiple times in this franchise, which clearly states since 1983. That's when the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location opened. But we've all just assumed the fact that that's the first time we've seen Freddy's in the gang. But what about Fredbear's Family Diner and the Springlock suits? Many of you may be scratching your heads at the moment, wondering where I'm taking this. But let's take a trip down to the basement of MCM and see what we find. Okay, a test pizzeria and test animatronics that seem to be functioning pretty well. And hold on a second, is that the Endo 1's? Yes, I do know that these are test animatronics and most likely are not the final product, which are the classic animatronics, because we know that the classics were built off of using parts of the original classics, the unwithered versions of the withered animatronics, using the Endo 2's. Do you see the issue here? Why is it in 1979 we are seeing the Endo 1 prototype versions of the classics? If that was the case, that would mean the Endo 2 variants, which are the withered animatronics, have already been created. But is this so far out of the box to speculate with? Shortly before the release of the FNAF 2 movie, Scott drew our attention to the fact we had not solved the complete mystery behind the Endo 2's. It was later revealed in the film that they were spring-lock suits. Now, even though this film is not in the same canonicity as the games, I do think it is interesting that Scott himself brought our attention to this detail. One thing that we learn a lot about in Secret of the Mimic is the creation and development of the spring-lock suits, and the fact that they went through various different designs. Namely, the first versions being called the V1's, which are the spring-lock suits we all know and love, and eventually the one that takes William Afton's own life. It's been theorized that this is the one that Henry Emily created, along with some help from Edwin Murray. But then Edwin Murray was contracted to design better suits, which would turn out to be the V2's. But if the Endo 2's, which are the endoskeletons that the Wizards use, have already been created prior to our gameplay of Secret of the Mimic, that would mean that it's quite possible to say that Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, as well as the Wizards, have already been created as animatronic spring-lock suits. And is it too far out of the box to speculate that these animatronics are singing songs alongside Fredbear and Spring Bonnie at Fredbear's Family Diner? And with these wonderful brand new designs, William and Henry decide to start an entire new restaurant chain called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And this would line up perfectly with what Ralph is talking about. The fact that these animatronics since 1978 or prior have been singing songs for 20 years, leading us to the date of 1998, being the definitive date of Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And we can finally all relax and say, yeah, we know the day for FNAF 1, Scott. You gave us everything. But just because we may have solved one question doesn't mean that there aren't new ones. Because now we have to start to ask ourselves the question, what animatronics truly were at Fredbear's Family Diner? Could have been that they were testing the first versions of the classics there to see how the audience reacted to, and then begun the special Fazbear project with Edwin Murray to create our beloved Freddy's, which then originally opened, according to the tokens, in 1983. Personally, I believe this theory holds a lot of weight to it and makes some things make sense. And to be honest, I'm surprised that more people do not believe in the year 1998. In fact, I ran a small poll on my own channel and found out that over 87% of you still believe the 1993 date, as opposed to 5% of you believing 1998. That's a massive difference. And so let's just recap why 1993 does not work for the FNAF 1 year. For one, it came from the very first FNAF Theory video from MatPat. And the way that he came up with this specific year, at this point in the timeline and the franchise, no longer hold up. We also have to remember that one of his leading pieces of evidence for the fact that 1993 was the date was based off real-world events which took place in 1993 at a Chuck E. Cheese pizzeria, where unfortunately 5 people were shot to death. However, Scott Cawthon had to step in later and clearly said that none of the events of Five Nights at Freddy's were based on true events. And so MatPat took that, paired with the fact that in 1993 you were being paid $4.25 per hour, which gets you to $170, which isn't exactly the amount of money that's on the paycheck, but it's close. and paired it with those real-world events to give us that 1993 date. And it also doesn't line up with multiple other things that we've learned in this video. For instance, the 20 years reference that Ralph says. If he said this in 1993, that wouldn't make sense to go back 20 years prior to 1993. But if we look at 1998, not only does it line up with the 20 years reference, it lines up with everything else that we discussed. And also, if you want to bring up the fact that the minimum wage per hour is $5.15, personally, I don't believe Scott, at this time of making the very first FNAF game, was worrying too much about the amount that's paid on the check. And the way that we know this is because after playing Night 6, which technically is overtime, we only get paid 50 cents more, which logically makes absolutely 0 cents. Now, some of you might say, well, in FNAF 2, the paycheck amount lines up with the year of 1987. I think Scott Cawthon really only did that because he saw us doing that for FNAF 1. We have to remember that FNAF 1 was not supposed to take off as large as it did, and so there are things that Scott Cawthon changed when moving forward into the game franchise. And so with that, I do think it is safe to say that the topic is still up for debate. However, 1998 will now be my year that I will be supporting. And if you want to hear another theory about possibly the opening of the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, go check out this video. It's very interesting. And with that, I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Make sure to be respectful and leave comments today. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have a Faz-tastic day.